Hello, today we discuss when she ignore you. Follow these tips. When she ignores you, the first thing that hits a man after 60 is not anger. It is silence that suddenly feels louder than words ever did. Because at this stage of life, you are not just dealing with a woman's attention, you are dealing with your own memories, your own expectations, and the quiet fear that maybe you are no longer important in someone's world. But here's the truth. Most men never hear clearly enough. Being ignored is not always rejection. Sometimes it is distance created by emotion, misunderstanding, or shifting priorities in life. And your response in that moment decides whether you lose respect or rebuild attraction. And let me tell you a story of a man named Arif, a 63-year-old retired teacher living in a small town near Punjab, a man who had spent his life being disciplined, respectful, and emotionally reserved. After retirement, his life became quiet, and that is when he met someone unexpected, a widow named Salma, slightly younger, warm in speech, but emotionally unpredictable. At first, she would call him in the evening just to talk about small things food, weather, old memories, and Arif felt alive again, not in a loud, youthful way, but in a calm, meaningful way that made his evenings worth waiting for. But slowly, something changed. The calls became shorter, replies delayed, and then came a phase where she would read his messages and not respond at all. And that is where Arif did what most men do. Without realizing they are destroying their own dignity, he started sending more messages, longer messages, questions like, "Are you okay?" followed by, "Did I do something wrong?" And even, "Please reply when you are free." And each message was not bringing her closer. It was pushing her further away, because emotional attraction does not grow under pressure. It collapses under it. And one evening, sitting alone on his small veranda watching the sunset fade into darkness, Arif did something different. Instead of sending another message, he stopped, he put his phone inside the drawer, and for the first time, he allowed silence to stay without trying to fix it. The next day, he did not chase. He did not ask. He did not try to decode her silence like a puzzle. Instead, he went back to something he had abandoned years ago. He started walking again in the early morning, talking to old friends, fixing small things in his house. And most importantly, he stopped making her absence the center of his day. And this is where the psychology shifts, because when a man stops reacting emotionally, he starts regaining value in both his own eyes and in the perception of the other person. And after several days, Salma sent a simple message. "You are quiet these days. Are you all right?" And Arif did not rush. He did not pour his emotions out. He simply replied, "Yes, I have been focusing on my routines lately." Nothing more, no questions, no emotional pull. And this calm response created something unexpected. Curiosity, because silence handled with dignity is more powerful than words filled with neediness. And over the next days, she started reappearing slowly, not because he begged, but because he stopped chasing. And here is the deeper truth every man after 60 must understand. When a woman ignores you, your first instinct should not be to increase effort. It should be to stabilize your emotional ground, because attraction at this age is not built on looks or youth, it is built on emotional balance, predictability, and self-respect. And when you panic, you signal dependency. But when you stay calm, you signal strength. And strength is what naturally pulls people back in. But there is another layer most men miss. Sometimes ignoring is not a game. It is a message that something has shifted. And instead of assuming the worst, you observe patterns. You see whether she is stressed, busy, emotionally overwhelmed, or simply losing interest, because each requires a different response. And Arif learned this slowly. He realized Salma was dealing with family pressure and emotional fatigue. And when he finally spoke to her calmly without accusation, she opened up, not because he demanded it, but because he created space where she did not feel controlled. And that is the turning point. Because real connection after 60 is not about chasing intensity. It is about creating emotional safety mixed with self-respect. And if you are in that situation right now, where someone you care about is ignoring you, understand this clearly. Do not chase in panic. Do not punish in anger. Do not disappear in ego. Instead, become stable, become less reactive. Rebuild your life outside that silence, and let your presence become something valuable again. Because what people miss is not the desperate version of you. They miss the grounded version of you that does not collapse when attention is withdrawn. And in the next part of this script, I will take this story deeper into what happens when you respond the wrong way versus the right way, and how one small shift in behavior can completely change how she sees you again. Something subtle but powerful began to change in the dynamic between him and Salma, because silence handled correctly does not create distance. It creates curiosity, and curiosity is the beginning of emotional re-engagement. But what Arif did next is what truly transformed the situation, because many men think the goal is to get a reply, when in reality the goal is to regain emotional balance so that any reply becomes natural, not forced. And one evening, as he sat listening to the soft sound of the ceiling fan in his quiet room, he thought back to how he used to measure his worth by how quickly someone responded to him, and he realized how exhausting that mindset had been. So instead of reopening old wounds by checking his phone repeatedly, he placed it beside him and focused on his own life. And this is where most men fail after 60, not because they lack love, but because they lose structure in their own daily life. And when your life becomes empty, one person's attention starts feeling like oxygen. And that is dangerous because emotional dependence is not love. It is pressure disguised as affection. And Salma, on the other hand, began to notice something different. The man who once waited for her messages like a man waiting for rain and drought was no longer reacting the same way. And that absence of reaction created space in her mind. And in that space, questions began to form. Not dramatic questions, but small human thoughts like, why is he not replying like before? Did I upset him? Has he lost interest? And this is where attraction psychology quietly begins to shift. Because when someone realizes they no longer have full control over your emotional state, your value increases in their perception. And then one afternoon, Salma finally called, her voice softer than before, carrying a tone that was not distant but uncertain, and she asked a simple question about his health. And Arif answered calmly, not overly emotional, not cold, just steady. And that steadiness made her pause because she was expecting either emotional frustration or emotional begging. But she found neither. And this confusion is what creates reattraction in mature relationships, not games, not manipulation, but emotional stability. And over the next few conversations, Arif maintained one simple rule. He did not chase, but he also did not punish. He responded when spoken to, he stayed polite, present, and grounded, and slowly the energy between them softened again. But this time, something was different, because now he was not operating from fear of losing her. He was operating from respect for himself, and Salma could feel that shift even without words, because human behavior speaks louder than explanation. And one day she admitted casually that life had been overwhelming lately, and she had withdrawn from everyone, not just him, and instead of reacting emotionally or asking why she ignored him specifically, Arif simply listened. And in that moment, he did something most men forget. He chose understanding over interrogation, and that decision deepened trust more than any long emotional message ever could. And this is the core lesson hidden in this story. When a woman ignores you, your power is not in how much you chase her. Your power is in whether you remain emotionally centered while life unfolds around you. Because at 60 and beyond, attraction is no longer about intensity, it is about emotional maturity. And in the next part, I will show you what happens when you completely stop reacting from fear and instead begin to rebuild your identity in a way that naturally makes her come closer without you ever asking for it. Here's the closing continuation with a stronger emotional finish and a thankful tone, still in one flowing paragraph style. And now, as the story of Arif comes toward its quiet truth, he begins to understand something that most men only learn after losing too much energy in the wrong places. That when she ignores you, life is not asking you to chase harder. It is asking you to return to yourself, to the man you were before emotional confusion took control of your peace. And slowly, Arif stopped measuring his days by her replies and started measuring them by his own calmness, his own health, his own dignity. He began walking every morning, not to distract himself, but to rebuild himself. He started meeting old friends again, laughing in simple conversations, eating without waiting for a message that might or might not come. And in that quiet rebuilding, something beautiful happened. He became emotionally independent again. Not cold, not distant, but stable, like an old tree that does not shake every time the wind changes direction. And when Salma noticed this new version of him, she did not see a man trying to win her back. She saw a man who had already won himself back. And that realization changed everything. Because attraction at this stage of life is not created by pursuit. It is created by presence, and presence only becomes powerful when it is not desperate. And one evening when she called again, her voice carried warmth that had been missing before, not because Arif demanded it, but because he no longer needed it to function. And in that moment, he understood the deepest truth of all. That love after 60 is not about chasing someone who ignores you. It is about becoming so emotionally grounded that the right connection naturally returns without force. And if you are listening to this, take this message with a calm heart and real understanding. Do not lose yourself in silence that is meant to test your patience. Instead, use that silence to rebuild your strength, your routine, your self respect, and your peace. Because the moment you stop running after attention, you, and now Arif enters a phase that most men never reach, the phase where he stops trying to decode every silence and instead starts to decode himself. Because he realizes that when a woman ignores you, the real question is not, what is she doing? But what am I doing to my own peace? And in this quiet realization, his entire energy begins to shift. He no longer checks his phone with expectation. He no longer replays old conversations in his mind like unfinished chapters. Instead, he starts living in the present moment. And strangely, that is when life begins to respond differently. Because calm energy has a way of changing how others approach you. And Salma notices it even more now. The way he speaks less, but means more. The way he no longer rushes to fill silence with explanations. The way he seems emotionally complete even when she is absent. And this creates a soft pressure in her heart. Not guilt, but awareness. Awareness that the man she once had emotional access to so easily is no longer emotionally available in the same dependent way. And this is where attraction deepens again. Not because he is chasing, but because he is no longer chasing. And one evening, she sends a message that is simple but loaded with emotion. You have changed. And Arif reads it slowly, not reacting immediately, because for the first time, he understands the power of timing. And when he replies, his words are calm, grounded, without blame, without neediness, just truth. Yes, I stopped losing myself. And in that single sentence, everything shifts because it is not emotional pressure, it is emotional maturity. And slowly their conversations begin to rebuild, but this time on different terms. No longer from fear of loss, but from respect of space. As days pass, Arif begins to see something even deeper, that ignoring is sometimes not rejection, but confusion. Not always absence of love, but absence of clarity. And instead of reacting emotionally, he starts responding intelligently. He listens more than he speaks. He observes patterns instead of assumptions. And this new approach transforms how he is treated, because people do not respond to words as much as they respond to emotional stability. And Salma, who once drifted away, now finds herself slowly returning. Not because he pulled her back, but because he stopped pulling at all. And in this shift, there is a quiet lesson every man after 60 must understand. That dignity is more attractive than desperation, and peace is more powerful than pursuit. And Arif begins to enjoy his life again in a way he had forgotten. Morning walks feel lighter, evenings feel complete, and even silence no longer feels heavy, it feels respectful. And when Salma finally meets him one day in person, there is no tension, no emotional storm, just calm presence. And she tells him softly that he feels different now, more grounded, more peaceful, and Arif simply smiles because he knows the truth. He did not become someone new. He simply returned to himself, and that is the real transformation. Not winning someone back, but winning yourself back first. And from there, everything else either aligns or naturally fades. And finally, Arif understands the most powerful truth of all, that when she ignores you, life is not ending something. It is redirecting you, either back to your self-respect or toward a deeper emotional truth. And in his case, it led him back to his own strength, his own identity, and a calmer way of loving without fear. And he no longer sees silence as punishment. He sees it as space for growth. And if you are in that same situation right now, remember this clearly. Do not chase in panic. Do not beg for attention. Do not lose your dignity in confusion. Instead, rebuild your life, strengthen your routine, reconnect with your peace. Because the moment you stop chasing what ignores you, you automatically become someone who is no longer easy to ignore. And with deep respect and sincerity, thank you for listening to this journey. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your presence. May you always protect your peace, value your self-respect, and never forget that your worth was never defined by who ignored you, but by how you rose after it. Start becoming someone worth paying attention to again. And finally, with deep respect and gratitude, I want to say thank you for staying with this story till the end. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your presence here. May you always find clarity in confusion, strength in silence, and dignity in every relationship you hold. And may you never forget that your value is never lost, only waiting to be remembered again.